I'd like to open the planning board meeting for Tuesday, September 19th. It's 6:03 PM. And first up is we're having this meeting broadcast live and recorded. First up is administrative items. A, Southeastern Regional Planning and Economic Development District Housing Production Plan, Goals and Strategies Presentation.
Thank you, folks. Can you hear? Is this on?
Is it working?
Okay. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Taylor Perez. I'm the Assistant Director of Housing and Community Development at the Southeastern Regional Planning and Economic Development District, otherwise known as SERPED. We have been working on Westport's Housing Production Plan update for about a year now. Are you folks familiar with a housing production plan?
I am. I assume everybody is.
Okay, great. So it's a 5-year plan, just for a brief synopsis. Typically, it focuses on the production of subsidized affordable housing, but we also like to look at market rate and naturally occurring affordable housing, so we try and take a fairly holistic approach to our plans. The goal of today is essentially to just review these housing goals and housing strategies, which are a required element in a housing production plan.
Could you hold 1 second?
Of
I
course.
just want to be sure that the people in the audience can hear you. Can you hear her?
I didn't hear that. I'm sorry. I'm getting at that
Can you hear her?
A little bit.
A little bit.
I will
Can we, are these speakers connected to that? No. Okay.
Okay. I'll speak up a bit. And so before we go into the housing goals, housing strategies, I figured I will just give a very brief synopsis of how we got here. And then I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Chris Welch, who's a senior comprehensive planner at SERPED. And he will just talk briefly about the data and the survey that we conducted. So as long as that sounds good to folks, no questions so far? Great. So we contracted with the town mid last year or so. We've been doing this work at no cost to the town through 2 DLTA awards. We have conducted site visits. We visited, I think, in the summer. It was a wonderful hot day. We saw all sorts of different housing typologies. We wanted to get to know the town better. We've also conducted a housing survey, like I alluded to, and we have finished up the housing needs assessment, which is another required element in the housing production plan. And so before, again, I go into these housing goals and strategies, I'm going to turn it over to Chris. He's just going to give you an overview of the data that goes into the housing needs assessment and our survey.
I figure I'll just stand right here since the microphone's not working.
Oh, it works. It does work. We're broadcasting on TV as well.
Gotcha, test.
So if you could move it up.
Yeah,
there you go.
Much taller than me.
Hi everyone, my name is Chris Welch. I'm a senior comprehensive planner with SERPED. I'm a recent hire, but most of my work with this HPP has been with the needs assessment, so gathering data on the town, as well as helping to produce the housing survey that Taylor had alluded to. So just briefly to go over the kind of data what we did for the needs assessment. We pulled from a variety of sources, that being the 10-year census, the American Community Survey, the Warren Group for Real Estate Data, Esri Business Analysts for population projections, as well as the UMass Donahue Institute for projections as well. Kind of going over the survey, we put out about a 30 question survey in, what was it, March? Something like that. It was actually closed within a month, and we had about 195 respondents, which is very good. So yeah.
Unless you folks have any questions on that. Okay. Thank you. Bring this back down to my height. And so I think the goal today is we'll walk through these goals and strategies. There's 4 goals, 7 strategies. It's based, again, on the needs assessment, the survey, the site visits, and your previous housing production plan, which was produced in 2017. Ultimately, we want to just achieve consensus here that these are reflective of what you folks feel the needs are in town, and also just to make sure that when this goes to the select board that you folks have, again, given it the blessing it needs to go there. So I will walk through them just super quickly. There's 4 housing goals. The first one, and they're in no particular order, hence A, B, C, D, is to implement zoning changes that enable the creation of new subsidized and missing middle housing choices. The second goal is to create housing options and pursue programs that help support older adults who wish to age in place or downsize. The third goal is to ensure new residential developments incorporate, preserve, and highlight Westport's open spaces and natural resources. And the fourth goal is to continue to produce SHI-eligible units to achieve the Commonwealth's required amount and to support communities in need. I'm going to pause there. Any questions on the
What
goals?
does SHI mean?
That is the subsidized housing inventory. So it's your total number of subsidized housing units based on your year-round.
Okay, thank you.
So.
What are missing middle housing choices?
So we think of missing middle as the gap that's between existing market rate housing and income restricted subsidized housing. It's also sometimes referred to as naturally occurring affordable housing. So think of a home appropriate for a downsizing senior or a first-time home buyer or a young family, recent graduates, etc. It's just that gap between what someone who might just be starting out or looking to downsize could afford versus what, again, is income restricted subsidized and what's on the market right
Thank
now.
you.
Mhm.
Taylor, I have a question about SHI.
Yes.
Is that what we consider affordable housing?
Yes.
Does it have to be subsidized?
It does to be on the subsidized housing inventory, yes. That would be what we call like capital A affordable. So that is subsidized. It's through, or at least it's legislated under Chapter 40B. Hence the subsidized housing inventory exists for that. I believe you folks, after the May 2023 update, are at about 3.8 something %.
3.8,
Yes,
and we're supposed to be at 10?
correct.
But that is affordable housing or subsidized affordable?
Subsidized affordable.
So
And
what's the difference?
so again, there's this idea when we talk about missing middle, I think this is what we're talking about when we talk about like capital A affordable, which is referring to subsidized, and then like naturally occurring, which is referring to the existence of smaller homes that are just naturally cheaper because they have less square footage or they're on a smaller lot. That's kind of that difference right there. And this plan is aimed at the production of the subsidized one, but we try and look at it holistically.
But I have a problem with that definition.
Sure.
We, in our zoning bylaw, we have a inclusionary housing bylaw.
Mhm.
And it requires a developer doing over 10 lots
Mhm.
to provide deed restricted affordable housing.
Mhm.
So that isn't subsidized by the town, it's
No.
not subsidized by the state. Are you saying that when a developer makes that it's subsidized?
So usually that's referred to as a local action unit, which is, it does exist and it does count on your subsidized housing inventory so long as it complies with all of the stipulations that are specified for affordable housing, so that it's subject to an affirmative fair market housing plan, that it is deed restricted at 80% AMI or lower, and that it has a deed restriction of at least 30 years or into perpetuity. So if that is kind of going through all that process and it's going up to the state, it should be counted on your SHI. So that would include that.
But it's not subsidized publicly.
It usually, if they are on the subsidized housing inventory, they'll have a monitoring and a subsidizing agent, whether that's the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, it could be Mass Housing, it could be Mass Housing Partnership. I am happy to look into that for you folks, but I did actually just look at your subsidized housing inventory today, and I know you do have some ownership units and other rentals that are produced not through a comprehensive permit that are counting. So I would assume that that might be coming from the inclusionary component within your bylaw, but again, I can definitely verify that for you.
It just seems odd that when you're calling it subsidized, but there's nobody subsidizing it. Nobody's paying for it. It's just a deed restriction on property that is either 25 years or in perpetuity. Some of our inventory probably is the senior housing that we have on Route 6.
Yep.
But, and I guess that is, I don't know how much the town really pays for that. They
Mhm.
just own it and charge low rent.
Right.
So
maybe I think, and I'm happy to look into this further for you folks to clarify the definition, but as far as I'm aware, the subsidy doesn't necessarily have to be on behalf of the town for it to count. It's usually handled by, again, a state agency or another quasi-public who is looking at it. But Michael, I don't know if I'm like missing anything that's on the inventory, or if you're aware that the inclusionary component is going through the local action process. Okay. Well, I'll definitely look into that for you.
Well, we have very few inclusionary units,
Okay.
if we have any.
Gotcha.
Because what happens is that people come to us with 9-lot
Right.
subdivisions
Build right under
instead.
the threshold.
So, but it was a good thought.
So then I'm curious, is that something that you would like us to explore further as a potential strategy in the housing production plan, to look into making sure that those inclusionary units, maybe one, aren't being built at like that threshold, so maybe rather than like at 10 units you include something, it's a percentage of a total development that doesn't have a threshold, and then 2, we can look into the local action portion of that.
Well, I think we'd like to hear what other towns are doing. I'm sure we're
Okay.
not the only ones that have the same problem. I know Fall River and New Bedford have much higher percentages,
Right.
but they have access to housing money that we don't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I will definitely look into that for you. It's topical. We actually just had a conversation with the local action unit program manager up at the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities. So I'm still getting used to saying that instead of DHCD. I will double check with the zoning. I will double check with her to see if there's anything that we're missing, and we're happy to incorporate it.
Okay.
Mhm. Any other comments or questions on the goals? Okay. We can go to the next page and talk about the housing strategies. Great. I will read just the high-level points. There's some bullet points underneath. Just to kind of give an idea of this, we list the strategy. We give an approximate timeline, so short, medium, or long. Again, 5 years is kind of the threshold because we're looking at a 5-year plan. We give a priority assigned to it. These are all flexible and can be adjusted depending on your folks' preferences. We give an impact level, so whether it directly enables the production or financing of new housing, or it enables the production via maybe public engagement, et cetera. Then we also just acknowledge what goals it addresses. So first strategy is collaborating with proactive housing developers to create SHI-eligible units on town-owned land. This is the first one, again, just because these housing production plans, like we said, are primarily meant to address subsidized affordable housing, and so we want to address that up in front. Given that you folks are under 10%, it's pretty standard just to talk about it. The second strategy is to implement key zoning amendments to support new housing opportunities, which could include duplexes, triplexes, small multifamily, homes appropriate for first-time buyers, as we were discussing, particularly in the Route 6 area. I know you folks are looking at sewer in that area. The third strategy is to continue to allocate funding from CPA and to pursue other funding opportunities to support accessibility modifications for folks who wish to, age in place or downsize. Could we scroll down? Thank you. The fourth goal or strategy is to continue community outreach through the Housing Trust to promote the need for affordable housing and help dispel myths to solidify local support. This came directly from your previous housing production plan. The fifth strategy is to investigate opportunities for adaptive reuse to redevelop underutilized municipally owned land and buildings. We are always for adaptive reuse first to, again, revitalize an existing area rather than having to develop an undeveloped area or a previously undisturbed area. In tandem with that, you would review the availability of town-owned and tax title properties to, again, work with those adaptive reuse goals. And then the last, seventh strategy is to explore avenues to allow homeowners to deed restrict existing units and accessory apartments. I think we actually might have talked about this at our kickoff last year, which is what spurred our conversation with EOHLC about local action units. That one's a low priority just because, again, it's kind of a complicated process, but we're happy to elaborate on it in the plan. Given that, I'm going to open it up to you folks to ask us any questions about those goals, strategies, et cetera, because, again, ultimately we want to make sure that you folks feel comfortable with this and are willing to recommend these goals and strategies to the select board, because you both have to approve the plan before we can send it to EOHLC.
Comments?
Well,
Questions?
just comment that we're, I guess, looking at strategy 1
Mm-hmm.
and 5,
Mhm.
essentially, the adaptive, especially number 5, adaptive reuse,
Mm-hmm.
the former high school property, that's actively in process.
Mm-hmm.
There is a committee in town
Great.
charged with investigating the, all of the potential reuse possibilities for that building, and one of
Gotcha.
which is housing.
Great.
So that's actively underway, and strategy 2 is also, we have a committee exploring the Route 6 rezoning
Mm-hmm.
and formulating some ideas for, that will be proposed to the town
Gotcha.
for rezoning to include housing.
Right. Great. That's good information to know. I will include that in the plan.
Mark, can I, just pursuing that on number 5, do they have yet a preferred option on the high school as being either non-town hall use or town hall use? Because one option is if it's going to be town hall, then these buildings would be candidates for housing. Or if the other option is if the high school's available for housing, then these buildings are not candidates. So in terms of this housing thing, should you put in that the high school or existing town buildings would be candidates, depending on which way they go?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. I mean, certainly, as you said, if they moved all the town offices out of these buildings, this building and the town hall, to the new high school, then these potentially are available for
For housing.
adaptive reuse, yeah.
Great. So that would include the annex,
The
and
annex.
The
then.
annex town hall.
And the council on aging.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
council on
Great. That's great, because one of the main, so when we send these plans up to EOHLC, we do kind of like a pre-final board review with them to make sure that we've kind of checked all our boxes for the regulatory requirements within it. And oftentimes they're like, can you give us a couple more town-owned sites? Because folks typically either don't have a large inventory of town-owned sites that would be eligible or just are reluctant to provide them. So it's great to hear that you folks are, one, thinking about it, and two, like, are willing to provide those sites. We appreciate that.
In number 2,
Mm-hmm.
you say starter homes through 40R and 40Y or other mechanisms.
Mm-hmm.
40R, I think, has to be close to a transportation hub.
Right. So the reason I mentioned 40R, it's either, I believe there's 3 different things that would result in an approval. It's a downtown district or area, close to transportation, or another area of significant development interest. So we could attempt to justify that through 40R. But the state recently passed, an amendment that produced Chapter 40Y, which essentially takes the starter home component of 40R and makes it its own statute. However, there aren't any regulations or guidelines that have yet been released by the state. I think they're still thinking 6 to 12 months before they finally come out. So we would probably recommend going through 40Y because as far as I'm aware, I don't believe it has the same location requirements that 40R stipulates. I think it's more flexible.
So we are looking at a large section of Northwestport that's currently the Science and Technology Overlay District.
Yep.
To use part or all of that as we rezone the area
Mm-hmm.
as a adjacent community area
Mm-hmm.
for multifamily housing.
Ahead of the game. I like that.
Say again?
I said you folks are ahead of the game. That's awesome. For the multifamily housing, because I know you folks, I don't think have been formally designated, but
No, we haven't been permanently designated, but we're bouncing around the idea.
Yeah. I think it's better to be prepared than not. I know that there hasn't been any movement, but That's good to know. That's actually really good to
We
know.
at least have a framework in place.
Right.
So if it does, it's just not.
Right. Okay. And so,
Hopefully, we'd be a small town adjacent community.
I imagine, but I actually have to look at the numbers. I know there's a couple ways they calculate that. It's the per square mile or the actual number of residents, I believe.
Yeah, it's the town's population density which gets us as a small town.
Right, I would
If
imagine.
that gets modified at all, then.
Right, right,
Because we are gonna hit the population threshold.
right. I think we talked about this at the beginning of the project. I do remember that. So you're thinking of using the science and technology overlay for part of that, potentially for new housing? Okay.
To rezone that and leave the underlying districts
Mhm.
alone, the residential agriculture,
Okay.
but have an overlay district.
Would you want us to address that in the plan directly, or just?
I think you should.
Okay,
Say
yeah.
say it's under consideration.
Gotcha,
Say it's not done.
gotcha.
But I think that would probably answer a lot of their questions.
Yeah, they definitely, they being the state, really appreciates when you have like a concrete location in mind, so that's super helpful. We will most definitely include that.
But the implementation is contingent upon getting water and sewer,
Right,
which is contingent upon town meeting votes,
right,
which, who knows?
right. Gotcha. Thank you, that's very helpful.
So, can you describe 40Y at all, or do you know anything about it?
Why?
40Y, what you're saying.
Oh, I'm sorry. So 40Y, it is functionally very similar to 40R, starter home district. So 40R has two prongs. It's the starter home district and then the smart growth overlay, which is those like the bigger location requirement one. It has an inclusionary component. I can't remember off the top of my head the actual percentage, but I know they income restrict, at least in 40R, they income restricted at a much higher rate. It was like 110% AMI. Versus 80, which is nice because it opens up that eligibility. There are some basic size requirements. I believe I think it's at a density of either 4 or 8 units per acre. I'm trying to remember what else. I think you have to have a certain number of bedrooms, so a certain percentage of homes would be a certain number of bedrooms, and then another percentage is another one. I can remember the exact numbers, but there's certain size requirements, there's an inclusionary component, and there's, I think, a location stipulation that it can't be like more than 50% or 15% of your town land area, which I imagine it would not be, so.
So do any of these things allow us to do an age restricted?
That's a good question. I think in 40Y, I want to say no, but I don't know if you could include potentially like a density bonus for percentage to be age restricted. But I will look at the statute because, again, I'm not immediately familiar with that. But that's a good question. I will look.
Because our population is aging.
Definitely. That was one of our main findings.
If you look at the census data, decade, we're aging.
Mhm.
So- And I think that's one of the big missing links we have, is something for older people.
Right. So would a density bonus for age-restricted units be appealing to you folks for potentially the rezoning in Route 6?
Anything's possible.
Okay.
I don't know.
We'll explore that.
We'd just like to know what the possibilities are.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
We have developers who come to us who want to make an over 55
Mhm.
community, and they're trying to use one of our existing bylaws
Mhm.
on independent living facilities as an
Mm.
over 55,
Mhm.
and it's not the same animal at all.
Mhm.
So there's a market for it.
Right.
I know.
Okay. We will look at both density bonuses for age restricted. We'll look at 40Y. I think, given the fact that it's geared towards starter homes, I imagine that there probably are stipulations that it cannot be age restricted, but I don't see why you couldn't approach it in a similar manner, just producing smaller sized housing that would be aimed at both first time buyers and older folks wishing to downsize. And then also we can look at adult retirement community bylaws. I know there's some examples locally that we could reference. I think there's one in Sudbury. I think Mansfield has one. et cetera, but we can look at those.
I think Plymouth has one too.
Gotcha. Okay. I will look at those. Plymouth. Okay. Thank you. That's helpful.
Taylor, we also got some revised materials for Route 6 rezoning project as well, and so I'll send those over to
That would be
you.
great.
There are a couple of areas where we're considering rezoning to enable more housing development.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the largest area that would be impacted would be the unrestricted district. for the
Right.
most part.
Okay.
So I'll send you those materials as well.
Sounds perfect. Great. Any other comments, questions, concerns, feedback?
So what's the next steps?
So we will incorporate this feedback. I mean, again, largely this doesn't change what we're proposing, which is great. It's just helping us kind of formulate the narrative that's going to drive these goals and strategies. I would recommend that these are also brought to the select board because, again, both the planning board and select board have to adopt the housing production plan for it to then be approved by EOHLC. You have to submit evidence showing that both boards did adopt it. So I'd recommend it goes to them just for a brief review. If you folks are comfortable, again, recommending it to them. And then upon their feedback, again, hoping that it's not substantial, we'll begin writing the plan. It would be great to have a draft for you folks by, if it's now September 19th, probably end of October, early November, fully laid out report that you folks can review. And then with your blessing, we would send it to EOHLC for them to review, let us know if they have any feedback, which we will let you folks know about. It's usually not substantial. Sometimes it's like, can you go a little more in depth about water capacity, or could you talk a little bit more about demographics? Like, we'll pull a data point or two extra. Their edits are not usually crazy, but if they were, either way, we would let you folks know. And then essentially, once those edits from EOHLC are incorporated and you folks feel good about the plan and we feel good about it and the state feels good about it, you formally adopt it, furnish evidence to the state that both boards have adopted it, and they will issue you an approval letter. And then you have a housing production plan for 5 years.
I think I'm totally supportive of what you're doing, Tracy, and applaud it. And I think anything that ends up in the report that says 3.8% affordable housing is something Westport needs to address and should be of concern and highlighted and mentioned prominently. I don't know, in the headline and the cover page with the flag. I don't know where you put it, but put it somewhere big. Is important. The one thing that we've been spending some time on that's not in your strategy that you might consider is an issue that you might not think relevant. It's short-term rentals. And the reason that I lay it out is that as we listen to lots of our citizens talk about it, they describe what happens on Cape Cod and the impact short-term rentals has on housing stock. And if the goal here is to create a certain amount of housing units, short-term rentals has the opposite effect of removing housing stock. And so you're talking about addressing the zoning code. I think it would be useful to, in that section, identify short-term housing rentals as a threat to the creation of housing units.
Gotcha.
And it's something we already know, but I think in this report, it would be good to flag that as a threat to the creation of housing stock.
Gotcha. We hear this a lot. So back in my other past life, I was working at MAPC up in Boston, and it was another issue for similar reasons, where it's just the short-term rentals can just slowly absorb existing housing stock that's
Maybe
needed.
not so slowly.
Right, right. Do you folks have a good handle on like how popular they are in town? I imagine,
Yeah.
given the seaside nature and
You can
whatnot.
just look online.
Right,
Pursuit of the almighty dollar is always pretty popular.
right, right.
Yeah, and again, that's an issue which is actively being investigated.
Right.
They're putting together a proposed bylaw. We have no bylaw that governs
Right.
short-term rentals, so in fact, they're not an allowed use
Mm.
at this point. So
Right.
it is being actively, as I said, a bylaw is being formulated,
Sure.
and it's going to be, there will be town-wide hearings on
Mhm.
it, but it isn't very much in the top of our minds
Right.
of how to deal with it. And it is aimed, essentially, to address John's point, trying to keep short-term rentals to residents of the town.
Right.
So that it discourages or would, in fact, not allow someone who lives in another state to
Right.
buy a house
Right.
and they never come here, they
Right.
just rent it out
Right.
on short-term rental basis. That is, so if this bylaw goes through the way we're beginning to see it,
Mm-hmm.
something like that would be prevented.
Right.
So the housing stock would be, in some ways, it protects some of the housing stock, if you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
There are some families who depend upon those short-term rentals in the summer
Mm-hmm.
months, for instance, to cover their taxes or real estate taxes. So
Right.
it enables them to keep a hold of their property, so it
Right.
doesn't slip out of the families.
Right.
But it is being, it's also being misused too. So
Mm-hmm.
I think all of those things are gonna be addressed, and hopefully we come out with a good bylaw.
Right. Are you folks using any other towns' bylaws as a model, or are you? I'm just curious the starting point.
I don't know all of the town's bylaws that we've used as a model. We have probably like 6 or 7 that
Mhm.
we've pulled together.
Okay.
And they're trying to incorporate what's appropriate for Westport. What's not.
Sure.
And we do have a public committee
Mm-hmm.
dedicated to that. We're hoping to have it ready for town meeting next year.
Okay. I would be curious if you do at some point have those model bylaws that you, even if they're not going to completely replicate what you're trying to do here, just for our own understanding, because this has been like an up and coming thing that we're dealing with. But I think it's a gap in all of our knowledge. That's exactly the best way to approach regulating it, because it has gotten quite litigious at times.
Yeah.
So,
But my point is, you're producing a housing production report,
mhm.
and somewhere in the language, you want to say, the first thing you want to do in terms of producing housing
Mhm.
is not lose housing.
Agreed.
And short-term rentals lose housing.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point. I will make sure that's very clear. We also want to focus on preservation tactics, which is what I would call that. So we
Yeah.
will make sure that's highlighted,
Yeah.
for sure.
So Taylor, one of the other issues we're having
Mm-hmm.
in Westport, especially in North Westport, where the housing has been traditionally less expensive.
Yep.
We're hearing from real estate people
Mm-hmm.
that a lot of these housing units that are owned by older people are being bought up by REITs. And then instead of having an owner occupy it, they're probably out-of-state REIT that owns it
Okay.
and rents it out for much higher than the neighborhood
Mm.
has traditionally been.
Gotcha.
So, they buy a house for $280,000.
Mm-hmm.
Then all of a sudden, it's for rent for $3,000. And it is concerning to me because it decreases the amount of housing that is affordable
Yeah,
versus affordable housing.
Right.
destabilize the neighborhood.
It's destabilizing
Right,
the
for
whole
sure.
area. So
Right.
I'd like to know what other communities are doing about that, or it should be in the report. I mean, I think that's a real big issue.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah, we will definitely address displacement concerns in that neighborhood, no problem. This is Northwest Port. Just want to make sure I'm in the right area.
Yep.
Yeah, it's Northwest Port, it's bounded by Route 6, Sanford Road, Route 88, and 177. So
Okay.
you can imagine the kind of rectangle right there.
Gotcha. What was
That's
Sanford?
Census tract.
Sanford.
Okay.
Sanford Road.
Gotcha. Great.
I can send you the census.
Yeah, that would be
tract.
great. That's fine.
So it's a double whammy for the people who live up there. I
Right.
mean, not only do we have that problem, but the Board of Health is getting after people who have cesspools and saying they have to upgrade within
Is that because of the
2.5
Title V?
years now.
Title
It-
V amendments, or is that just even before those amendments pass?
Say again?
Regulation.
Because they're,
Board of Health
I
It's
gotcha.
a Board of
Okay.
Health
I
regulation.
gotcha. Okay.
And there may be some backpedaling on that in the near future, I don't know.
Gotcha.
But it exacerbates the problem because they're on such small lots.
Right.
We probably will be if we get water and sewering those areas.
Right.
But right now, it could cost them $60,000 to put a denitrifying system on a
Right.
small lot.
Right.
And so they look at that and they say, well, I'll sell it instead.
Right.
So they sell it for a cheap price because it needs a septic system.
Mm-hmm.
And then the people come in and put a septic system in and rent it out for
Right.
usurious amounts, so,
Is this your environmental justice neighborhood?
Yes.
yes.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. We will look into programs. Chris, I don't know if you know this off the top of your head. We've been exploring more opportunities through the Community Development Block Grant, CDBG. And I know, obviously, you folks are a non-entitlement. I don't know immediately if there is a consortium for this region. I know there's one run by Taunton and Attleboro, but that obviously serves further north. Maybe New Bedford or Fall River have one. I can look into it. Typically, the services that a consortium like that, who is receiving CDBG or home funds, would service is like first-time home buyers programs, but they also can service rehab programs. I can see if that could qualify, those types of upgrades could qualify under that program, or if you folks could apply through the Commonwealth CDBG program. So they essentially receive funding from the state to disperse, or excuse me, from the federal government to disperse to non-entitlement communities. Chris, do you have an idea off the top of your head if that could qualify?
Possibly,
Right.
but especially with, if it's an EJ neighborhood, there's
Mm.
potential for that as well.
Right.
Because that's a national objective right there for low and moderate income people.
Right, okay. We'll look into that for you, but we'll definitely
So
address that.
The income level for this area is, I think, 68% of the Massachusetts mean.
Right.
Which is low. It's probably the lowest on the south coast,
Right, okay.
so.
We will definitely look into it through CDBG to see if there's opportunities for either low or no interest loans that you're not making payments on that maybe just exist if you, until you sell the house, for example. And I also wonder if maybe the Department of Health or EEA or some other DEP, whoever, maybe they have programs to assist low and moderate income folks with upgrades, but I'm not sure. I can look into that.
Because, right now, you can get a loan through the town that comes through the state
Right.
For low interest. But if you're making less than $30,000 a year,
Right.
you don't have the money to spend another $1,000 or $1,200 a year
Right.
just on the repayment without any interest.
Right.
I mean, over a 20-year period.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, up there, we're really in a terrible situation.
Right. We will definitely look into that. Thank you again for bringing this to our attention. I will definitely look into that. The displacement concerns sound very, very real.
Any more
Yeah.
questions, comments? Okay, so do we present this to the select board, or do you come back and do that, or what?
So I will defer to you folks, particularly Michael. Would you like us to be at the select? So first of all, we will incorporate more of this feedback, address them more directly. So there will be some revisions just based on our conversation. And then we would give those revised goals and strategies to the select board. So it's up to you folks if you would like us there, or if you feel, just based per the planning board's recommendation, that it's sufficient to bring it to them without us. But if you feel they'll have substantial comment, we can be there as well.
So I think it would be great if you all came and talked to the
Mhm.
select board. You seem very knowledgeable on these programs, and I've only been working in Massachusetts for a year, so I'm still playing catch up on.
For sure.
on
I mean,
stuff.
so I feel the same way sometimes. There's so much out there. So,
So if you have the availability and if we still have the money, for you all to come down here.
okay. We can talk about scheduling offline. I know we're pretty jam-packed up through probably November, so if we wanted to work on a more expedited timeline, it might just need to go to them via that, but you and I can discuss offline.
Sounds good.
Great.
Thanks, Taylor.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you very
Appreciate
much.
it. Thank you so much.
I
One
think-
question?
Yeah, I think most definitely I'm one of the selectmen, so I would
Great.
really like to have you there to speak to us.
Of course. We will
I think
make
you'd
something
be
work.
A big help.
Of course. Sounds
It'd be
great.
good for the town administrator to know who Serped is too.
Yes.
Who are those guys? We don't even know. That sounds great. Thank you, folks.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
and I think we need to have the Affordable Housing Trust there too.
Yeah, I can see if Robert can come or any other
I
representatives.
don't know who's still on that, but
I know Robert Barboza is still the rep.
okay.
I think James is the chair now, James Sauber.
Save for something. Okay, well, thank you guys very much.
Thank you very much.
We'll definitely be there.
Okay,
Thank
Great.
you, folks. Have a
Thank
good
you.
night.
okay, next is Planning Office Schedule Review. Fee Schedule Review, I'm sorry.
So this is just an update for you all. We don't have any modifications to our fee schedule available at this time. I will be preparing some changes to our fee schedule. The town administrator asked us to compare our fee schedule to some of the nearby communities that have developed in a similar way to Westport, so in particular Dartmouth, Swansea, and Somerset. Our fee schedule's more or less pretty on track with those communities, but I want to take a larger look at the Serped area just to see, what's being done more broadly across the
Sure.
region. So I'll come up with a recommendation for our next meeting.
Okay, I think we have to, my understanding is the fees have to be commensurate with how much it costs the town to implement it, right?
That's
So
correct.
it can't be, you can't just pick a number out of the sky,
Right, yeah, we would need to take-
unfortunately.
do a bit of we would have to do an assessment of typically how much staff time is going into a particular review, and then we would use their salary to figure out exactly what that would come up to.
Okay, next is the 6:15,
Excuse me,
yes, sir?
I recognize the plot plan. Does that have to do with the flex boundaries?
This is the public hearing for High Ridge Road, I think.
Yes. I'd
Yeah.
like to speak on that, sir.
Well, we're going to have the presentation first. You can speak after, I'll recognize you in good time,
Okay.
okay? Okay, so next up is the 6:15 public hearing for 82 High Ridge Road, file number 23-023SP-FF. Request by the applicant to consider the special permit flexible frontage application for Eric J. and Jillian Raposo for property located at 82 High Ridge Road, Assessors Map 42, Lot 7, 8-2 in IT. What's IT?
A 1T, that's part of how the law
1T,
is.
okay, I'm sorry.
So, Mr. Chair, the applicant is actually not present at the moment.
Okay,
So I would recommend that it be continued to our next meeting on October 3rd at 6:30 PM.
Okay, and it says here that this is a refile due to incorrect lot lines?
Yes, so this same property and same project was before the board on August 8th, and there was an incorrect measurement of frontage on Lot 3. So the engineer has rectified that in the plan that he submitted for this filing.
So is this to consider a revision to what we approved, or is this a new application?
Nope, it's a complete new application.
Okay.
Now, but this is a public hearing,
Yep.
Yes.
and we have a gentleman who wants to speak. Why is the applicant not here?
I'm not sure. I spoke with the engineer today, so I'm not sure. I don't know if something emergency related came up, but I would just give them the courtesy of continuing once out in the event that something did happen they weren't able to be here for.
You want to hear from the public?
Yeah, I think they've made the effort to come here. I don't see why we can't. What
Yeah.
do you think?
I think, we have someone who wants to speak. It's a public hearing.
But it's going to be continued. But
Yeah,
the applicant isn't here to respond to the question, but I guess we can just hear the question,
sure,
right?
yeah. He
I'd like
he showed
input
up.
from the planners.
Yeah.
From experience, I would just continue it without any public comment since the applicant's not here to respond. But that is just my,
Well, this gentleman showed up, though,
So I think we're not going to address your question, but we will
You know that-
hear what your
Okay. That
concern.
sounds good. My name is Ray Roberts. My address is 73 High Ridge Road. I've been there for like 35 years. I'm not here to oppose Eric proposes flex land boundaries. But what I'm here for is because I do not see checks and balances in the system. Plus, I found boundary errors when the plan was approved on 8/8/23. On 8/8/23, the planning board meeting on Eric's flex boundaries, Mr. Sean Leach said Lot 3 frontage, which is Eric's frontage, was 132 feet. I objected right away and said it's 104. Because I was a novice at the meeting, I was told that Sean would speak first and I would speak later. When I did speak, I forgot about my original objection and talked about other boundary problems. The board passed Eric's flex ban. I believe that I went to the planning board the next day and I made a mistake, I said to them, and I did not bring up the original objection to 132. On the map, 132 should be 136, which is the wrong boundary to begin with, and it should have been 104. What I said to them was, what do I do now? The flex boundary is 104. Plus, the new boundaries, the calculation, actually, when I looked at it, it would take away over 17,000 feet of my property. Plus, the neighbor across from me would probably have the same amount of an effect. The planning board then said I would have to go to the land court in Boston. We cannot change the boundaries. I was concerned about selling my house in the future because the boundaries are now public record in the town. I would have to lawyer up and go to land court to have the boundaries changed. I met with my neighbors who were affected by the boundaries, which are all wrong, which were all wrong. I said to them that I would contact Northeast Engineering Consultants, and I asked that Sean meet us to talk about the boundaries on Friday morning. Friday morning, no reply. Jason, my neighbor, then called up Sean. And he talked to Sean, and Sean said, paraphrasing, don't worry about the boundaries to some extent. Now, since Reposa is not here, and neither is Sean Leach is not here, may I approach the board? They say pictures are worth 1,000 words. I've done my homework, and I've spent a great deal of time putting this together, because the errors are pretty obvious. And if you look very carefully, you see the errors are right there. In fact, 132 should have been 136, and then on and on and on. Now, the flex boundary is 132, which is, I looked at the deed that Eric had. His boundary is 209. So does Gus on the other side. The whole cul-de-sac, they're each equal, 209. Now, his flex boundary, he's making new ones. He's making 154, 150. He's making his 104. Then he adds the curvature. The curvature on my deed says it's my property. The same thing with Jason. The curvature is 31.42 feet. And when you get 209 and you extract 50 and 54, roughly, you get 104. And then if you add 104, roughly, you get 209. So by bumping up the boundaries, and if you look carefully, you see that the boundaries were very carelessly bumped up. Now, what took place after Jason contacted Sean and he said, don't worry about it, he was extremely upset. And if you look on the photographs, you can see Jason's property. And it's pretty obvious that the marks, or the concrete marker, is right at his mailbox. Now, it's been like that for 35 years. Anybody that walks the property can see this marker. The problem I have with everything is number one of the markers was a hazard to me. The first one, and I have them marked. Number one on each side and number two. Because it was a hazard to me in my cutting the lawn, I removed it over 25 years ago. It doesn't exist anymore. Now on Jason's side, we looked for the number 2 marker. It's not there. So as you look at the photographs, you will see the mailbox in the second one. The second one is gone. Yet, what takes place is once the redesign of the boundaries took place, he adds one and takes one away. For instance, the boundary that I pulled out, he had it there. Then it's missing now in the latest map. And another thing that's interesting, and maybe Amy can answer this, you got a CD disc punch, and it says on Jason's property, held. Do you know what that means? Held. Amy?
Yes?
Because I don't know what it means.
No?
Because it doesn't exist. Neither does mine exist, and I pulled it out 25 years ago, so it's gone. And I knew what I was doing because it's a hazard to me. So the same thing is with the new map. He now puts it up there and says it's held. Really? It doesn't exist. I went over there with Jason and we looked for that marker. We measured because everything is equidistant. And I measured everything. That's why you see those photographs there. And it's like, where is it? So what I'm seeing here are, very careless mistakes. And one of the careless mistakes was right in front with the first map that he put down as 132. If you look and add the mathematics, which I did right away, it's 136. And not only that, it's incorrect because the deed stipulates 209. There's no way he could add property. So what they did is they forced the boundaries up, which was a gross error. Now all the boundaries have been reduced or put back to the old boundaries. The old boundaries were made in 1987. And the old boundaries and the markers have been there for 35 years or more. Because I've been here a long time, I know where they are. I talk to my neighbors, you see them, it sticks up. So, all this aggravation that I went through and time consuming, and not only that, if it hadn't been for me, this meeting would not be taking place. Because I alerted Jason, he talked to him, then he alerted his father, and his father knew Sean Leach. And he said, I want to talk to you like yesterday. And he did. Within hours, they talked. And when Sean Leach, this is what I'm getting for Jason, when Sean Leach saw what took place, he said, oh, it's all wrong. So if you look again, you see the email from Jason at 7 o'clock at night. That particular new boundaries was issued. The problem I have is if you look off to the left, you see a boundary of 248 feet. That's an old boundary that was turned down by the board when he had 4 pieces of property and wanted to build another cul-de-sac. That particular boundary on the new map has been changed from 248 to 209. Now, if you look at the original map that I have up in front, all the boundaries have been changed back to the 1987 boundary markers. So what am I getting at? We have very carelessly, we don't have any checks and balances. We don't have anybody checking Sean Leach's work. And I can't get an answer from Amy about anything. And I, as a homeowner, would have had to go and lawyer up, and I was going to lawyer up. I had a lawyer contacted me and told me everything I need to know about what takes place in towns. He's got 40 years of experience. I was ready to go. But then Jason told me he's going to change the boundaries within hours after having a meeting with him and his father. Within hours. So it tells me it's all computerized. Because if you look, his boundary, his southern boundary has been extended at a 45-degree angle. And now it's 104, back to my original statement that I objected to. And now because of the flex plan, they added it, so he went from 78,000 square feet to 80,000 square feet, just like that. It's all computerized. I'm concerned, and I'm doing this in public to alert the public that look, if it wasn't for my knowledge in real estate, and I have people that own companies, they're relatives of mine. I used to be an appraiser long ago. I understand what could go wrong. And because I did that, I investigated, and by investigating, I'm the only one that's actually doing anything about this and exposing this. And it wasn't for me, this meeting wouldn't be taking place. So that's the reason why I did what I did. And I would have liked to ask Sean Leach, which he's not here, it's like, how did you go about all of a sudden you have an epiphany? Is that you look at a map, and I think it's because he looked at an old map and said, hey, this is not right. Because I checked Eric Raposa's deed. I haven't. I went to the registrar of deeds. I am so upset about this. It isn't funny. It's 209. There's no way he could have put that, the 132 or 136. And my deed says what it says. I do own that curvature. I have 181 feet with the curvature. That's my frontage. And then, because of the error, like I said, there's over 17,000 square feet. Had these boundaries taken shape or taken root in this town, and I'd have to go to the planning board, and my property has now been diminished by over 17,000 feet, I'm not gonna be a happy camper. That's why I'm bringing this up, and I'm trying to make somebody, whether it be Amy or somebody, double check this man. Because the answer I got from Amy was, prove to me that you can get 132. And
Can I correct you?
go ahead.
We had a conversation. I told you procedurally what you had to do. Our rules and regs state that the plan that comes in for an applicant has to be signed and endorsed by a professional land surveyor. Mr. Leach is a professional land surveyor. I am not. So I cannot say his plan is 100%. I can't argue his plan because I'm not a professional land surveyor. So when you had a question about it, you would have to procedurally wait for the decision to be rendered, and then you could hire your own professional land surveyor.
That's what I'm getting at. That's what's wrong with this, because mathematically, if you look,
I
it's pretty
understand.
obvious it's wrong.
I'm just telling you
I
procedural.
understand that.
what
I
is
heard
required.
that, and I got the answer. You told me he's a professional. And when I heard that, it sounds like I was a professional too at one time. I was the man at his company. And I had highly experienced 25 years, like I must have had, what, 25 applicants for that job. And according to the manager, they couldn't even come close to me because I had tons of experience with changing systems over. So I had a tremendous amount of experience. So being a professional, that's nice. But unfortunately, you have to have some kind of checks and balances built into this. Because if it wasn't for me, Jason and I would have lawyered up and gone to land court. And you know what he said to me? We're gonna sue these people. This is not right. This can get really nasty. And that's why I'm coming here to present and say, the board has to find a way to get around this problem, because I believe, from what I hear from people in the business, it happens all the time. The surveying is wrong, this is wrong, that's wrong. And I'm saying to myself, wow, maybe it's because no one can challenge this man. And I think there should be a way to look, because it's pretty obvious what I gave you. You got the old, you got the new. Really? There's no way you can move those boundaries around. Then on top of it, you can ask, where's your deed? My deed, I checked it. Eric's deed, I checked it. I checked them all. I went to the registrar of deeds, I got it. Because I wanted to know what was going on.
So can I don't know how much longer you intend to go.
I'm almost done.
Well, as you heard at the beginning, the applicant is not here,
I
and
understand.
it's our intention to continue this to a date in the future when the applicant will be here. And you said that, and you presented this information, and you said that you want to challenge the applicant, and I don't know whether you're going to be able to. First of all, we appreciate you bringing this to our attention.
Well, I don't think I said
Just let,
challenge
you've
either.
talked quite a
Yeah.
bit, all right? So let me talk for,
Yes, sir.
I'm not gonna talk as long as you did. But the way you might consider challenging this person, besides giving us this information we can review and the planning staff can review, is at the public hearing where the proponent will be here. If you were here, then you can summarize what you said, and the developer is here, to respond, and then there can be the challenge that you desire. Right now, that's not possible, so we're gonna continue this, and then if you're able to attend, that you can have the back and forth that I think is warranted.
Now, here's the thing. In the first meeting, 8/8, Sean Leach said this flex boundary is 132, and being a novice, I got out of my seat and I went over there.
Well, now you've learned those, so you're not gonna do that again.
Yeah, I understand that. So I went to him and I said, no, it's 104. Now, because I did that, I was out of order, so I had to come back. He speaks, I speak, and then I forgot my original question. But he gave an answer to the board saying, this isn't my reason, because I checked on YouTube, and he gave a reason like, whatever, this is 132, and these are the reasons for it. But as you can see on the maps, on the information that I gave you, there's no way you can get 132 out of that. I understand that because I tried the formula. I tried the formulas. There's formulas, and I was able to,
Well, the proponent has a professional engineer,
I understand.
and so our staff is not professional engineers. If you want to avail yourself of a professional engineer, that's something you can do. But, you know, that's up to you whether you want to do that or not.
Yeah, but yeah, I have a question. The question is this. It went from 132, now we're having the second meeting, and what I did in the first meeting is what you're, well, you're not okaying it, but as you can see, the boundary is 104. So, is there anything that you could say, why is this being done? I mean, does the board challenge Sean and say, what's happening here? Why are you doing this?
This is why we have public hearings. We haven't finished the public hearing, we haven't even continued it yet. So we appreciate what you brought to our attention. We haven't even had the public hearing yet, so why don't you let us do our business?
Okay, so do I have to replicate what I gave you? Because I'll be here in the next meeting you said was on.
No, our memories are pretty good.
You
So
don't need that, you don't need that to enter into the record for the planning board?
if you want to leave your remarks, that'd be great. No, I'm serious. If you want, you had your remarks written down. If you want to leave those for the record, that'd be great. We'd appreciate that.
Well, I can type it out and then.
Yeah, that'd be perfect.
And then we do it again.
Yeah, no, that'd be great.
So after looking at everything, nobody on the board has any comments because of the way it's handled?
As I said before, we're going to hear what you had to say. It's a
Yeah.
public hearing, the applicant isn't here. It's really, we shouldn't be talking about it.
So can I ask the question, why is he not here? Not only that, Eric.
I already asked the question and we got an answer, so.
We don't know.
We don't know.
So I'd like to,
So when they're not here, because they were here the last time, and they didn't do anything, and all you said was,
We're not making a decision tonight. We're gonna continue it. And we'll have other questions, when the developer's here, and perhaps you'll be here too, and we can have more extended discussion then.
So one thing is the applicant's, Sean Leach is a registered land surveyor, and so like the bound that you said you removed, that was from an old subdivision. Because the bound is not physically in that place, that can be reclamated, and it is, it's still there. Just because it's not there, the location is still there, and that drill hole is still there. And I'm sure that when, it was a little hard to follow what you were doing, but a lot of these things are things that he's doing for the flexible frontage, have nothing to do with your actual frontage that still exists. And that bound that you have missing now still exists. It's just not on your property, but it's still there at that location.
I understand that, but by forcing the flex boundary to increase, which was an error, it forced the boundaries to come across.
Well, when the
on my
professional registered land surveyor is here at the next meeting,
side. Oh,
so
okay.
when you have this question, I'm very sure he's very competent and he's been working in this town for a long time. He'll have the answer that you need. And you can always challenge that with your own professional land surveyor, and that's what they go to land court with.
And so just to say, then it could be a dispute between the new owner of the property and him, right? But it doesn't change what you have on your deed.
Correct.
If that is correctly laid out, that's what you own.
Yeah, but
On the
see,
on the deed and the plan, so you bought a lot in an approved subdivision with specific bounds, right, and specific frontage on the road. Whatever somebody else does somewhere else doesn't affect what you did, because they didn't come to us to change your lot.
Okay, I understand what's going on, that's why in my opinion, he moved the boundaries just to get the case over, because according to this lawyer who gave me the information, he's been at it 40 years, he says, if the town clerk stamps what you people have passed, it is now part of the record. And then I said, well, what are the new boundaries? And I said, are they fixed? She says, well, I don't know, but you could go to the town administrator, Jim, which I did. And I went up there and I talked to him with my wife. So, interesting that the new boundary doesn't have the marking like the first one. Because only Jim and Jason know in the world that I pulled that marker out. And yet it doesn't exist on the finalization of the map. But everything else has it. It's very suspicious to me, like it has all this markings and at the very end it's taken out. And I mentioned to Jim, and I said, that thing was taken out over 25 years ago, it was a hazard. The rebar was up too high, too dangerous, pulled it out after about 5, 6, 7 years. So it's interesting how all of a sudden marker 1 is missing, marker 2 is there, but in the beginning, marker 1 was there, but not marker 2. But if you look, and that's why I have the pictures, kind of obvious that it's right there. All you can do is take a look.
Yeah, we understand all the problems.
I understand.
I think.
I'm just making my
Yep.
concerns because I understand that what Amy said, you're kind of in a box. But then again, when she says to me, I can't change the boundaries, and when Jim says to me, well, they're part of the town public record, then I go to sell my house, and I told Jason, I said, we try to sell a house. Now we've got problems with the town, so what do? So there's where the lawyering, talk to the lawyers and everything, come in the land court, and I'm saying, I would think you want to avoid that, because what came out of his mouth was not good. We're going to sue him. And I said, well, I guess that's what we'll have to do, because we're going to be spending a lot of money and time doing this for nothing. And we were right. The boundaries have been changed. So I understand what this is all about. It's no big deal. It gets the flex boundaries and everything, but the boundaries are incorrect. And then the boundaries become public record. That's not a good thing when you go to sell property in the town in the future. So I'm bringing this, like I said, I'm not here to give Eric any problems. But what I am here to do is expose something that, in my opinion, needs to be brought to your board. And you have to try to figure out how to handle this. Because it's probably going to happen again to somebody else.
Ray, can I just
Yes, sir.
interrupt for a second? I mean, maybe I'm wrong about this, but in this packet of information you gave us, you have the first plan on top, which is the copy of the original subdivision, the Woodline Estates, right?
Yeah.
And it shows that you and Jason have your frontage that includes a little curvature as part of the cul-de-sac.
Yes.
But your next plan, and maybe this is what has you, the next plan is one where that curvature is taken out and your property lines are are drawn straight. But this is not what he's changed it already.
It's fixed.
He's recognizing, on, this plan should, maybe making you excited for no reason because it's incorrect. That's the way I read it. And the way, the latest plan that's been filed puts those boundaries, your southern boundaries, let's put it, at the end of that, of a little piece of curvature, both sides.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it's there, and it's in your deeds, and I'm trying to say, I believe, your deed and the current plan that he's resubmitted are all in agreement, and nothing has changed, nothing's
Now,
been
maybe-
taken away from you, as far as I read it.
Well, maybe
No,
there's a piece missing. I said,
Well, can we deal with this on October 3rd, so we're not guessing anymore?
okay,
You want a motion?
Yeah,
Mr.
I would
Chair?
like a motion to continue.
okay.
I move that we continue this public hearing to October 3rd at 6:30.
Second.
All those in favor?
Now, I can say again,
Aye.
Aye.
do you need this? And do I have to make
They
more
have-
copies? Or
No,
do I
they
have
have-
them and bring
He,
them
he's
back?
already corrected exactly what you brought to us.
We're
It's-
good.
It's fixed.
It's all right. Okay,
It'll be
so I
addressed
have
in the
that.
next meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you for your patience. I knew this was gonna be a problem. It's long-winded and everything, but I have no choice but to try to explain what the
Okay.
truth is. Thank you.
okay, next up is the 6:30 public hearing for Silverback Construction, 21-004 SPA minor. This applicant is requesting a site plan minor modification for 2 Cheryl's Way, map 28, lot 17C, which was approved by the board in November 2021. The applicant requested a minor modification to reduce parking by 1 space, leaving 15 spaces, and move the stairwell from inside to outside. It was advertised and notice was mailed to the abutters. So, do we have the applicant here? Okay, so can you tell us a little beyond what I said about what you're doing?
You pretty much hit the nail right on the head. We're trying to add a bump out to the building, to add a stairwell. Instead of having a stairwell on the interior of the building, I wanted to extend it to the outside, so I don't take up interior space. So we're adding 16 by 10 feet.
Mhm. So, I can see on the right-hand side, it says 25 feet from the building. Is that the road right away? On the bottom part? Does that say
Here.
25?
That's the setback.
Yeah.
From the southerly property boundary.
25 feet.
Yeah.
From Legion, yeah.
Yeah. So, and the parking space you're eliminating is where?
There's one less parking space in the front row closest to the highway.
Okay. So it's the building inspector that would have to opine, but isn't that stairway gonna violate the setback? Have you shown it to the building inspector?
No. How would that change it? We didn't change that to the setback, it's still the same.
Is it attached to the building?
Correct.
Which
So
is
then the
what-
setback would be 18 feet, right?
20 feet.
17
Well,
feet.
20 feet.
Which is which is the stair, the outside stair on this plan? Is it that dark area?
No, just this here, that's a sidewalk. This is,
Oh, okay.
this is the bump out right here.
Oh, yeah.
This is,
Okay.
the exact building stays the same, other than this 10 by 16.
So the 10 by 16 has a roof over it,
Correct.
but the stair underneath, there's an open stair underneath it?
No, it's all enclosed.
Well, then where's this outside stair? that you said?
Meaning I
That's
moved
the
it,
stair.
originally I was gonna have a stairwell, this wasn't gonna be here. I was gonna have the stairs inside, getting to the upper level.
Yeah,
I wanted to add it outside so it didn't take up space inside the building.
okay, so it's an enclosed
It's gonna be-
stair
It's all enclosed in the building.
within that
Just-
extra addition.
Correct. I'm just pushing it, I'm just extending the size of the building to that amount.
I see.
So this dark area is just sidewalk and ramp. Where's the doorway?
It would be coming in on the front,
On the front?
meaning, where am I? Be coming in from here. In the front part of it.
So I guess what's confusing me is what's the ramp doing over that way?
I don't know why that's there, to be honest with you. Because maybe that was from the original. We were gonna be, the door was gonna be here. So
Okay.
why this is added here?
I think it probably should be removed from the plan.
Well, it's next to the handicapped, so that may be,
Yeah, but it's gonna
Why?
take you into the space between the building and the road. It's not
Yeah.
gonna take you into the building.
So we can just add it here. Or you can
Probably
keep-
should be in front of that. I don't know. I don't know what the elevations are. But I don't have any problem with eliminating one space. I think the planners can tell us this complies with the number of spaces they're required to have,
Yes, it does, that's correct.
the 15.
15.
And so does it matter that they're adding, I mean, does that change our original,
It's a minor revision.
the parking spaces? But I mean, does the addition impact our original approval or
I,
not?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. I wouldn't, there's no, it's not, inside space isn't being, like, the increase, it's still a 4,200 square foot building. It just has the stairway located outside and the exterior instead of the inside.
Well, it's not outside, that's the wrong.
It's gonna be inside.
Yeah, it's inside, it's an addition
It's
With a
outside
stair.
of the original,
footprint,
Design.
the original design, so. You've
but
increased,
it's still inside.
yeah, but you've increased the size of the building. I mean, it may not make any difference, I'm asking whether it has any impact on what we approved originally.
it's minor.
Amy, does it have an impact on the original approval?
I don't think it has an impact on the original approval. I read that decision.
So instead of
Many times
4,200
it's-
square feet, it's gonna be 4,380 square feet. I don't think that's-
We need to make a motion to approve this minus sub.
I think we have to have a finding that it's a.
Yeah,
it is a minor.
So I'd make a motion to determine that the modification to the approved site plan is minor.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And then I'd make a motion to approve the minor modification to the approved site plan for the elimination of one parking space and for the stairs to be constructed outside of the original building envelope versus inside the original building envelope.
Second.
Comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Also,
And then I'd move to close the site plan approval for minor modification application for Silverback Construction under the site plan rules and regulations, section 13-1 for the property at 2 Cheryl's Way, Assessors Map 28, Lot 17C.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
also,
You're good to
Good to
go.
go.
thank you.
You ought to get that plan fixed before a guy's out there building that ramp where you don't want it.
Yeah, I'm the guy building mine.
Okay, don't build it. But you're gonna need it probably for ADA, right?
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Okay,
Have a good night.
Sorry to make you wait.
Yeah, that's all right. It's interesting.
Sure.
Sean corrected it right here. I mean,
so,
unfortunately,
okay, assistant planners report?
Okay,
Thank you for bringing
so
that
I just have some updates on the various committees that have been active lately. Just a reminder that the Climate Resilience Committee has a meeting next Thursday, the 28th at 5 PM virtually.
27th or 8th?
28th.
that Wednesday?
No, it's Thursday,
There's a water committee meeting on Wednesday,
the 27th.
7th.
Yeah, Water Committee at the Watershed Alliance, right, is Wednesday at 6. And the Climate Resilience is virtual the next day, Thursday, at 5.
Yeah.
Right.
Also, the harbor water study, the staff members and stakeholders met for a meeting on September 6th, and Frank Getchell was present to present his newest memorandum. And just a summary of what happened was there was well 1 and well 2 well sites on 755 River Road that were tested for quality of the water, like salinity wise, and the quantity of the water. And both of them yielded pretty good water with the quantity for the gallons per minute and the quality. It was pretty fresh water. It wasn't very, there wasn't saltwater intrusion much for that. So the next steps are to do further testing on those well sites, and just actually, I think, pump it for a longer amount of time and see what comes up and make sure that it's not pulling from other areas. So I believe we're going forward with additional testing for those 2 sites. I know there was a Barnum property site also. I don't know if you want to add to the Barnum property.
I think they're gonna test the Barnum well when they're doing this testing. They have, I think last week, drilled, instead of a 1.5-inch well, they did 3 of those before. And that's what they tested, that's what you're talking about. And the next step would be to do, in the same area of those test wells, to do either 1 or 2 2.5-inch diameter wells, and do further testing for the Pond Meadow well, which they got permission to do,
Mm-hmm.
and for the Barnum thing. And they have done one 2.5-inch well last week.
Okay.
And I think that the harbor people are paying for the drilling and looking to use some of our already approved money for Weston and Sampson to do the analysis. So, Frank was supposed to be there today, but I went by there twice and I didn't see him, so I don't know.
Yeah, I had reached out to him late last week because after we had our meeting on the 6th, another invoice came in for about $5,000. So I just followed up with him to make sure that the $6,000 we have left would cover the services that were supposed to take place, but I haven't heard back from him yet.
Okay.
How deep was the well?
It's about, I think they went down to bedrock. Bedrock is like 15 or 17 feet.
50 or
15 or 17, depending
100?
on which one. No,
15.
15.
15
like
feet?
From the ceiling to the floor.
Oh, wow, shallow,
Yeah.
yeah.
And this is on, I mean, these wells are on private property, right?
Right, Rob Hale's property.
I don't know who that is, but anyway, so,
It's between the river and Cocky's Pond, the north end of Cocky's Pond, as opposed to the south end.
right. Well, 755 is, that's right across from Spindle Rock.
Yeah, it's just north of Spindle Rock.
Yeah. And so if the well, I can't believe it's only 15 feet, but if they're in a lens of water?
They're in a lens of water with rock and gravel. And it's Frank says it's a perfect place for getting water from the water that comes down over the bedrock from up north.
Yeah.
Makes this lens. And when he did the first tests, they sent somebody down there for all three little wells and scoured them out with a pump of fresh water to get all the gravel and silt out of them. And then did tests, draw, 20 gallons out and see how long it takes to get back. And it was good recovery. So much so that he wants them to drill some more test wells that are bigger in diameter and really do some. He thinks they can get, I think 5 to 8 gallons a minute out of each one, and have a well field so that he gets 15 to 20 something gallons a minute. And with storage, that should be enough for the area.
So then if that happened, then some arrangements worked out with the owner of the property that
They have an agreement they have a right of first refusal for like a 99-year lease.
Yeah.
And DEP has okayed having the radius of no stuff incorporate Summer River Road. So, I mean, you're in a tough spot down there. I mean, it's really hard to find a place. So, anyway, it's a potential, and they're also finally getting the other water company down there to meet with them and discuss it, because they're in the situation, they have a 120-year-old well, and they don't know the health of the well down the road. It's a 120-year-old cast iron pipe that goes down. And if something happens to it, they'd be out of luck too.
Yeah.
So, it's interesting. Go ahead.
Okay, so the short-term rental committee, that was approved by the select board on September 11th, and the first public meeting was held on September 14th, but the next meeting date is September 28th, next Thursday at 1:30 p.m. The first meeting of the committee reviewed a draft bylaw for short-term rentals and started the process of defining what a short-term rental is. The committee went over the current table of uses and agreed that an updated table of uses is required in order to specifically call out and address short-term rentals. And the continued discussion on the same matters is anticipated for the next meeting.
Can I ask a question on that? So, to get this enacted, that has to be at town meeting?
Yes.
And when would that be?
So typically Jim Hurnett would request the warrant articles by February. So we would have to have a public hearing at least by January.
And so is that the goal, to get it enacted
Yes.
in the spring?
Yeah, definitely.
But, don't be confused. I mean, we need a finished article ready for giving to the selectmen in February.
Mm-hmm.
It means we have to have public meetings way before to hash out what it says.
Right.
So,
But do we think that's possible?
Yeah, I mean, wouldn't you say we're working on a timeline, we're having meetings every 2 weeks, or
Yeah.
actually every week it started?
It's possible, I don't,
But-
Roger's not, we're not reinventing the wheel.
Right.
We're
There are others to
taking
go on.
guidance from what other
Yeah.
communities
Yeah.
have done and pulling that over for what works for Westport.
Yeah,
So I think it's feasible, and when we brought articles to town meeting last year, we were working from about the same time frame.
yeah,
And the public input is gonna be very valuable, because, we're working from what we think collectively as a committee would be in the best interest of the town, but you don't know until you go out in public and test
right.
it. And somebody raises their hand, hey, what about, I can't do
Yeah.
that, whatever it is. So we have to, so we're gonna start that process fairly.
and I'm
So-
sure there's plenty of people who are renting out their places on Airbnb that aren't causing a problem.
that are not, that are not causing a problem. Is it?
Yeah.
Exactly. Oh, yeah.
So we have to make sure we're not stepping on their toes too.
Well, that's, yeah, and it'll come as a rude awakening for those folks who are doing, they're not causing any problems to their neighbors, things are running smoothly, but this is gonna be, it'll involve inspections and, regulations and getting approved by the town. There are a whole bunch of steps you'll have to go through to.
Well, the other thing is, you don't have to get it, to think you're gonna get it perfect is crazy, right? You're gonna get it, if you get a 90 on this test, that'll be great, because you're going to implement it, and then you're gonna find out as you implement it in the first year, you're gonna find out some things you didn't get quite right. And you should expect that, right? To think we have to be perfect out of the gate is maybe unrealistic. You can learn from other people, and you will, but shooting for perfection,
Yeah.
you will just learn as you implement some unexpected things that have to do with Westport that will have to be corrected after the first year. And you'll come in a year from now at town meeting saying, we didn't anticipate this. Here's some minor corrections.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Personally, I've been saying to the committee, let's try to craft, we have to look at I call it the electability of the
Yeah,
bylaw. Can we get,
This
most
through.
people to buy into this so we can adopt it? And absolutely, there'll be a lot of bugs to iron out later.
yeah, and don't worry about it. This is a raging fire, you gotta put it out.
Yeah.
And then you can figure about fine tuning it later.
We've done that before.
Yeah, I mean, zoning is like that, right? You get it 90% and then you keep fine tuning the bugs.
Hopefully you get it 90%.
Yeah. I was always happy with like 75,
Right.
when I was in school. I got a 75, I was good.
Okay, Amy, continue.
So I touched upon this vaguely at the last meeting for the Plymouth Boulevard drainage. So after being in contact with Lindsay from Woodard and Curran and Jim, I have more information on that project. So the project itself is being funded by an MVP grant awarded to Fall River as part of a larger study. One of the components of this study was to see if they could make some improvement to the water quality to South Watuppa Pond. And they've done preliminary concept design for each community, which is Fall River, Westport, and Tiverton. Paul Ferlin from Fall River is the lead on this grant. There have been a couple conference calls, I believe, a while back with Jim, Chris Gonzalez from Highway, and Chris Capone from Conservation, but there are none scheduled for the near future at this point. Jim himself said that he hasn't approved or signed on to any specific conceptual plan that they've proposed yet. And that it's a very preliminary design, and at this time, not sure if it'll get constructed. The grant is only for the preliminary design. It's not for the further design or the construction for any of this.
Okay, but it got approved as an overall thing for Fall River
Yes, through Fall
as an
River.
MVP grant.
Yes.
And would MVP give us a grant for our section of this? For more,
In order to,
more plans? It just seems that,
yeah, we would
I
need
mean, if
to.
it's just for the health of the South Watuppa Pond, the way that they have changed their focus, I'm not sure that they would approve a grant for that anymore.
I know that if they wanted to implement it further, that each town would have to take their portion of it and fund it.
No, I understand, but I mean, they got MVP to do what Fall River did, the overarching plan, and we have that, right? Would they fund Westport's portion for the next step plan?
I can check.
100% plan?
I can check with that and see if they would.
I don't know if MVP specifically would. I'm not saying that they wouldn't, I'm not sure. I would suspect that there would be other grant opportunities out there that have to do with addressing eligible balloons or, more general water quality grants that you could
So I-
potentially pursue for this project.
I'm assuming, and maybe it's erroneous, that it got approved by MVP with a little political pressure. And I don't know that we have the political muscle to get our section done, but
Well, I've talked a little bit on this, and I don't know if anybody knows Terry Sullivan from 402. So he's retired, but he has offered to come to our next infrastructure oversight committee meeting and try to direct us in a direction on some funding for that area. I just got that information today, and so we're gonna be trying to move forward with that.
I'd like to attend that one.
There's also a public meeting, informational meeting for this project on Monday, September 25th at 5:30 at UMass Dartmouth. So I will be attending that meeting.
Who else do you expect to be there?
I'll be going to it too.
Yeah.
It's
Do
that,
you think our MVP person will be there?
Courtney, I can touch base with her and see if she's attending.
she may, I mean, she'd be the rep for Fall River too, but it's not at UMass it's at the UMass Dartmouth Center for Innovation, I think. It's not actually,
Oh.
it's not at
Okay,
the Dartmouth campus. But,
yeah. Oh, you all have the meeting info on, with the reports. Last but not least, Manny had come into the office and asked about, inquiring about PAR Engineering. They're doing the design for the Beech Grove Cemetery for the future plots that will be dug or placed. So Jim gave me the contact info for Jim Jackson, who's the project lead on this. I think that the main contract and the work agreement was sent to PAR Engineering. It should be signed soon, and Jim said that any proposed work and plans will be submitted to the planning office to keep us in the loop with that.
So what is the town asked PAR to do?
I think design the placement of the future plots.
Just, well,
I think engineer it, the next phase of the cemetery.
yes, I'm not sure that the water table is low enough in that new section. Because,
Yeah.
because I think over in that area, this could be just hearsay, that they've dug graves and there's water in them.
I wouldn't doubt it. We did have an individual come in earlier today. Her husband is in that cemetery, and because of all the rain, it was pretty saturated, and she was concerned. So,
I think that they're burying them in the water now, over there. So, there's specific state requirements for cemeteries, and one of them is water table. And when they gave up the cemetery land for the police and the fire department, I think that was higher up, I don't know.
oh, it is higher.
Yeah, and
Well, that was one of the reasons I wanted to get a little bit involved in this. And on the design end of that, I walked down on that section, it drops off substantially, but we also do have enough material that we stockpiled from the old high school over at the Drift Road site, that we could possibly build that.
Build it up.
We have the material there, we could, I think we could effectively build the next phase with what we have existing there. And probably make it the best phase of the whole cemetery. It's got the potential.
So,
But again, that what you brought up is key on when they bring this forward to Amy, so we can review this and we can put our input, and Highway's giving some input.
so we do need more cemetery space, that's for sure. So before the Cardi plot was approved for solar, I was thinking about having the town buy some of that and use it for cemetery, because it's right next to, it abuts,
Well, with what's going on with that Ducati plot right now, people we might want to approach them again and see if there's some useful land over there that we can do it. Because right now they're in negotiations with the bonding company that's taking over all that stuff.
okay. So I think it is a good thing to do. It would make sense from a cemetery standpoint to have it contiguous. And also, when Sarah Raposa was here, this is, I don't know, 6, 7 years ago, she had contacts in, I can't remember which landscape architectural school, maybe UMass Amherst, that we could have gotten some volunteer students to help do a landscape design for the cemetery. Because, I mean, using power engineering, they're not landscape architects. They're not gonna make it look pretty, they're gonna make it look efficient, and that's, if I wanna be there, I want it to look pretty.
You want Mount Auburn.
Right. Or something.
Yeah.
You're not gonna notice.
I might. How do you know?
Yeah, I don't know.
So, you know, I think it makes sense to try to get some help, but it's like going to an engineer to do a subdivision. You know what you're gonna get. And if you go to a landscape architect, you're gonna get something a
Yeah,
little different.
I agree with you totally.
So, have we already signed the contract with Power? Are they doing this for free or what?
Well, we voted in the select, that's when I found out about this. We voted in the selectmen's meeting to, I believe what the contract was, like $43,000, something like that. To be paid for out of the perpetual care money.
I won't say anything.
Next.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, first one I got is the Southeast New England Program Network, the SNAP Network Stormwater Planning Assistance. This is something we applied for in tandem with the Conservation Department and the Westport Land Conservation Trust. It's a program through SNAP where they provide municipal staff assistance with coming up with a conceptual design for a nature-based stormwater retrofit. So what we applied for was near a ditch near Mill Pond. It's on Gifford Road, and I can show you what it is. This was it's gonna be hard to see up here, but it's where the cursor is, right here, it's this ditch. Mill Conservation Pond areas over here. This ditch drains towards the pond, and it's down Gifford Road from Westport Dairy. So this is going to, the purpose of this application is to, I guess there's been some scouring of this drainage ditch, so it would address that, and it would also be an added enhancement to prevent any sort of nutrient loading, pathogen loading coming from the dairy farm up here from the road. So again, this would just be a conceptual design, so if we are selected for the assistance, then we would have to then search for funding in order to actually to build it.
So the watershed paid for some kind of drainage ditch across from that dairy farm 15 years ago. Is that still functional, or is it?
It's still functioning. I think this is just another added layer of protection to that, and also to address some of the issues with the drain kind of. It's starting to, need to be reinstalled. Yeah. Okay, so then next I've got the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness 2.0 program. So we put out a request for proposals last month. We just closed out our RFP period last Friday. We received 2 proposals. I've selected one. I haven't contacted the vendor yet, but so I don't want to say it in a public meeting who we've selected until I've notified the vendor, but I will let you all know who we've selected here shortly. I'll be contacting them tomorrow. So then I'll have more updates for this in our Climate Resilience Committee meeting. We'll be going to Serped on Thursday for a regional MVP meeting. It's like a peer meeting. So we'll learn more about the next steps for the program at that point. And we'll be able to take that to or provide an update at the Climate Resilience Committee meeting.
So did we get any good responses to this RFP?
We had 2 responses, and I put it up on the Massachusetts APA website, the town's website. I contacted 15 different vendors and directly, so I didn't really get a great response. I think we'll be happy with who we end up selecting.
It's a public meeting. The 2 who responded were both excellent. They're both excellent. Thank you very much for responding to us.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, it would have been nice to see a little bit more, larger base to select from. But
Well, I think it's a new thing.
yeah,
So, not many people have already geared up to do
yeah,
this.
we'll see what other people's experiences have been. It's a new program, so we'll find out this week. Next up is we're looking into this grant through the Economic Development Administration. This is a grant called the Public Works and Economic Adjustment Assistance Program grant. It's a federal grant that can potential lead for funds for the Route 6 sewer. We could get up to potentially 50% of the project costs in grants. However, this is a program that uses income eligibility for the communities where the infrastructure will be located. We have 2 census tracts that I think are eligible. One would be the census tract right north of Route 6. The other one is Westport's Environmental Justice Neighborhood. The one just right north of Route 6 barely makes the cut, so I don't know if they would want some more additional income surveying in that area. So I'm waiting to hear back from them for preliminary eligibility assessment. So let's hope that we're able to be considered eligible and submit an application. This is a program that's considered on a rolling basis, so we're not up against any hard and fast deadlines.
This out of the Philadelphia office? Or who do you do, or Boston?
It's not Boston. I think it might be Philadelphia.
Philadelphia, yeah.
And then lastly, there's another grant that's been brought to my attention, and I don't know if I'm going to have time to actually apply for this one and participate in it, but seems interesting, and I might see if it's a good fit for a recreation department. But it's a program through the New England Foundation for the Arts, and it's a grant that essentially would give the town up to $15,000 for a public art project. The part of it that I don't know if I can dedicate the time to right now is you have to attend 6 training sessions over 11 weeks. And we've just got a lot going on, so I don't know if I can really dedicate that time to it, but it was brought to my attention through a member of the Westport Cultural Council. So we'll see if the rec department can partner with it, and maybe we can help apply with the rec department or something like that. But we wouldn't be, directly responsible for administering it. So we'll see what happens with that. And those are all the updates I have.
Okay, for the federal infrastructure, projects that are eligible for money, would you think, because we have so many rural clusters of neighborhoods that don't have water for fire suppression, would these neighborhoods be eligible for some kind of grant to put in the big fire cisterns in various places in these areas?
Do you have any particular grant programs in mind that you've heard of?
The IRA?
So, what I would say is that if we're trying to get down to a level of analysis smaller than a census block group, there's no real data available. And I think then when we go to try to make a case for need in that community, it gets difficult because there will be other areas of that census block group that will bring up that average median income for that neighborhood. That's kind of like, so I think that's kind of the case for Westport more generally. So if we take a more fine-grained level of analysis, we have an environmental justice neighborhood, but the town in general, if we're looking at an average median income, brings it up. So I think what I'm saying is that if we're looking at particular neighborhoods in Westport that are in, an area that's not considered an environmental justice neighborhood, I just don't know if the data is there.
Yeah,
to make that
I'm not
case.
looking for money that is allocated to environmental justice areas. There's money for roads, there's money for bridges, there's money for all that kind of stuff. And I know that water and sewer are a special thing that's going through the state revolving funds in every state, which is, I think, a terrible thing. But what I'm looking to see if there's anything that would allow, not environmental justice, because these are all in little pockets of summer communities around the river, but they are really in need of fire suppression. And maybe you could check in with the fire chief or something and see if he knows of anything.
Yeah,
Because I think they'd love to get places where they can get water quickly.
Yeah, we can check, and I'll check with the fire chief to see if he knows of anything. I guess I was just speaking more towards like some of the federal programs that have recently been publicized. Those programs are really emphasizing a kind of redistributive approach to
But I think.
plugging those funds
Yeah,
into.
but if we're gonna be putting water and sewer in those
Right.
places, I don't think we need to go after fire cisterns, but
Yeah, we can, I'm always open to take a look and see what we've got. But, yeah, and you were thinking maybe through the IRA for that?
I think, well, whatever. But the IRA, I think, is the one with all the money, so might as well try to get some. So are you done with your report?
Yeah.
Okay. So, correspondence, zoning board of appeals. Notice of a denial of administrative appeal for 50 Spinnaker Way
House
for
from
the
hell,
short-term rental.
so-called house from hell.
Yeah. And I think we all know what that's about. And the second one was a notice of decision setback variance of 181 East Beach Road. The one about 50 Spinnaker Way, I read both things, the first decision and the administrative appeal of their decision. And it just goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
It was a long hearing, from what I understand. I wasn't there.
But the variance on 181 East Beach Road, I didn't read that. What is that about?
I know it was denied.
So removing the existing 6x8 shed, construct a 10x16 shed with a 6x10 attached deck, with setback 5 feet from the eastern property line.
No.
And it was denied. The variance was denied.
Okay, invoices?
You want a motion, Mr. Chair?
To file? Oh,
To pay?
on the invoices, sure,
Yeah.
sure, I'm sorry.
Mr. Chair, I move that we pay Westport Shorelines $533 for legal notices. And if you want me to combine
Sure,
them,
yeah,
that
go
we
ahead.
also pay Quill $588.88 for chairs for the planning department conference table.
How many chairs did you get for
8?
that? 8 chairs for
It says on
$588?
here,
What?
8. On the invoices up here, actually, there's 8 of them.
Yeah,
That's pretty cheap.
I think Nadine put them all together, right?
Maybe put
I
together
put,
one.
I put together
put-
one.
One.
Okay. Well, anyway, I second it.
It's probably the wobbly one.
Is there a second?
Yeah, Mark second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Matters not reasonably anticipated within 48 hours? Hearing none?
Move to
Uh,
adjourn.
Do we have any minutes?
No, they're done, but they just weren't placed on the agenda, so
Okay.
they'll be at the next meeting.
Okay, there's a motion to adjourn on the table.
So move.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.